Somewhere in the silent corner of time, there existed a soul. Perhaps it was your soul, perhaps mine, perhaps a soul that represented all others, walking under a sky of indifference, carrying the invisible weight of a quest it itself barely understood. This soul lived amidst vastness. Sometimes this vastness was an open field, where the wind combed the dry grass in melancholy waves, and the sun set like a worn coin, painting the horizon with farewell colours. At other times, the vastness was a small room, a confined space where silence echoed louder than any crowd, and the only company was the trembling dance of a candle flame. Wherever it was, the feeling was the same, a profound loneliness. Not the loneliness of the absence of others, but the loneliness of the absence of meaning. A restless heart beat in that chest, a constant rhythm against the ribs, asking, always asking. The questions were like pebbles thrown into a bottomless well. The soul leaned in, hoping to hear the sound of water, but only silence returned. There was a thirst, a desperate longing for something that could fill the arid space that logic could not reach. A desire for a truth not made of stone or human laws, but of something transcendent, something that could, once and for all, illuminate the dark corners of existence. The days unfolded like pages of an identical book. Waking up, work, interactions, falling asleep. Each action seemed like a draft of a greater act that never materialized. The soul searched in faces, in books, in the night sky, but the universe seemed to hold its breath, guarding its secrets with cruel passivity. This was the state of being, awaiting, a long and tiring vigil for a dawn that stubbornly refused to arrive. And then came the weight. The weight of daily life is not like that of a stone, which one can drop. It's like the atmosphere itself, pressing from all sides, at every moment. Doubts, once nocturnal whispers, have become daytime cries. You're wasting your time. What you're looking for doesn't exist. Be practical. Accept the emptiness. The voices of the world formed a deafening cacophony. They were the gears of society, grinding and demanding conformity. They were the indistinct faces in the streets, each seeming to have found their place, their purpose, while this soul wandered like a displaced leaf. The pressure to be normal, to desire the right things, to smile at the right moments, was a burden that bent spiritual shoulders. In the midst of this aridity, faith, that small, stubborn seed, seemed a foolish thing. It seemed like a fragile sigh in a sandstorm. How to believe in invisible gardens when all around is desert? The soul felt exhausted, oppressed by its own search. The weariness wasn't physical but intrinsic, weary of rowing against a tide of cynicism and materialism. Hope had become a tiny, almost cold ember, buried beneath the ashes of failed days and unanswered prayers. The soul shrank, preparing to accept the darkness. If the divine existed, it had surely forgotten this small corner of the universe. It was then, at the exact moment of surrender, at the deepest point of silence, when the soul stopped screaming and simply listened, that something changed. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a wind. It was a light. At first it was almost imperceptible. Less than a light, it was the suggestion of a light, a glow that didn't come from the window, nor from the candle, nor from the sun. It came from within, or perhaps from a place so distant that it was, paradoxically, closer than the skin itself. It was a subtle warmth in the center of the chest. A golden point, the size of a pinhead, appeared on the inner horizon. The soul, accustomed to darkness, observed it with cautious curiosity. The melancholy that was its constant companion gave way to a slight astonishment. There was no fear. Whatever it wasn't strange. It was, somehow, familiar. It was like remembering a song never heard before. The small light didn't flicker. It simply was. Constant, soft, silvery and golden. It was a call, a divine whisper that had finally found a crack in the veil of oppressive reality. The soul turned towards that sensation. Its heart, previously heavy, seemed to float for an instant, and the light, feeling observed, feeling welcome, began to grow. What was a point became a thread. The thread became a bundle. The bundle became a pillar. The brilliance intensified, not like the blinding sun, but like the revealing full moon. The light had substance. It was almost tactile. Particles of pure luminescence danced in the air, and the room, once a dark refuge, began to be bathed in this ethereal clarity. The shadows, which had previously clung to the corners like sleeping monsters, were not pushed away. They were dissolved. The light did not fight against the darkness. She simply made it irrelevant. The soul rose. The weariness had vanished. A mixture of reverence, fascination, and a pure, childlike joy took hold of her being. The air around her became electric, rarefied. A sound began to fill her, not a sound for the ears, but a vibration, a celestial chant felt in the bones, a harmony that seemed to be the very structure of creation. Light filled the space and filled the heart with an unspeakable presence. It was a peace that was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something so vast and right that any conflict seemed impossible. The soul felt like an empty cup being filled by an ocean. It was the promise of something grand, the manifestation of unimaginable grace, the prelude to revelation. And there, in an instant that stopped time, in the exact center of that pillar of living light, the form began to condense. The light did not diminish, but folded upon itself, weaving a sacred geometry, a figure that was simultaneously human and entirely other. The angel Gabriel revealed himself. He did not arrive. He emerged. His presence was of unsurpassed beauty, a splendor that made mountains, oceans, and galaxies seem mere sketches. He was majestic, and his vast wings were not made of feathers, but of liquid light, mother of pearl and starlight. They unfolded, filling the soul's vision, and each filament radiated shades of white, gold, and a celestial blue that seemed to contain all the compassion of the universe. His figure was serene, but overflowing with power, a power that did not oppress, but sustained. He floated, or perhaps the ground had risen to meet him, his feet enveloped in luminous mist. The soul, before that vision, could do nothing but kneel, not out of fear, but out of immediate recognition. The small self, the ego with its worries and fears, simply dissolved like salt in water. Her eyes welled up, not with sadness, but with such profound astonishment that the only possible response was surrender. She lifted her face, and the angel looked at her. Gabriel's gaze was not an ordinary one. He didn't just see the physical form. He saw the journey. He saw the frightened child, the weary adult, the unshed tears, the silent questions. He saw the seed of faith, that ember almost extinguished beneath the ashes, and in his gaze there was recognition. Approval, a love so absolute that it healed every wound it touched. The soul felt for the first time in its existence completely seen and completely accepted. The sacred revelation presented itself. Gabriel slightly raised his hand, and the vibratory chant that filled the space seemed to focus. He opened his lips, and he spoke. The voice was not a sound traveling through the air. It was pure understanding, imprinted directly on the soul. If it had a color, it would be gold. If it had a texture, it would be like velvet and lightning. Each syllable resonated in the deepest part of the being, and the soul understood, not with the mind, but with the heart. "Fear not," the voice said, and fear, like an ancient garment, fell to the ground, undone. "Your search was not in vain. Your solitude was the fertile ground where the divine seed could sprout. The message flowed. They were not just words, they were living concepts. Gabriel spoke of the nature of purpose. He spoke that each soul is a unique thread in the great loom of existence, and that even the most hidden thread is essential to the beauty of the pattern. He spoke of hope. Not the passive hope that things will get better, but the active hope, the certainty that light is the fundamental reality, and darkness only its temporary absence. What you sought, the voice continued, was not in the world, for the world is a reflection. What you sought is what you are. You are a spark of that fire that wove me. You are loved beyond your capacity to measure. Each word was a balm. Each phrase dissolved the doubts and fears that had previously haunted the heart. The pressure of the world, the cynical voices, the gears of society, all of that seemed small, distant, like the dream of a fever that dissipates upon waking. Gabriel's message was not an order. It was a reminder, an awakening. In that sacred encounter, not only was a message delivered, but a soul was remade. The angel's light penetrated the essence of the soul, and the cold ember burst into a living, bright flame. When the message ended, a profound silence settled in. But it was a different silence from the one at the beginning. It was not an empty silence. It was a full silence, filled, vibrant with meaning. Slowly, the soul rose, but it was not the same soul that had fallen to its knees. Its expression was one of a serenity she had never known. There was peace in its eyes, but also a quiet strength, an inner glow, an echo of Gabriel's light, now radiated from its own skin. The weight was gone, lightness took its place. The soul looked at its own hands, not as tools of labor, as instruments of wonder. She looked around, and the room, or the field, was no longer a prison or a desert. It was a stage. The world, once grey and oppressive, now seemed to vibrate with color and potential. Reality hadn't changed, but the perception of reality had been forever transformed. A new, unwavering faith had blossomed, not a blind faith, but a faith based on experience, on the certainty of that encounter. The angel Gabriel observed the transformation. On his divine face there was a slight smile of satisfaction. The mission was accomplished. The vision began to fade. The intense light that formed the angel began to recede, dissolving back into the ambient light. The majestic figure became translucent, its wings of starlight melting gently into the air. The soul watched, not with sadness, but with profound gratitude. Gabriel's figure disappeared. The pillar of light diminished. The celestial chant softened until it became a distant echo in memory. The extraordinary light receded, and the ordinary light of day or candlelight returned. But something crucial had changed. Gabriel's light hadn't gone away. It had merely shifted. Although the figure of the angel had departed, the essence of the encounter, the sacred revelation, remained. An inextinguishable light had been kindled within that soul. The soul approached the window, or the door of its solitude. It gazed at the horizon no longer with longing, but with purpose. It was no longer alone. It was no longer a question. It was now an answer. Darkness might return. Doubts might whisper. The pressures of the world would surely try to push it away again. But now it had an anchor, a moment of absolute truth to which it could always return. The memory of that light, that gaze, that voice. It was no longer a place of isolation. It had become a sanctuary, a place where the sacred had touched the profane. And with her head held high, with humility and a new, silent courage, the soul walked back into the world, no longer as a lost seeker, but as a bearer of light.